In Moss, you guide a little mouse called Quill to help her find her uncle. She controls great and her weight feels perfect thanks to how high she can jump. To help her navigate through each location, you can interact with the environment. The touch controllers appear as orbs in the game. You can use these orbs to pull, push and twist certain parts of the environment, which enables Quill to reach other areas. These platforming puzzles are reasonably simple, and there was only a couple times here that really made me sit back and think for a few seconds. They are fun to work out, and because you are literally changing the environment for Quill to proceed, it makes you have a bigger bond with her, especially when you solve a puzzle and she looks up at you and raises her hand for a high five.
Who on earth would want to touch a rodent?
What are you on about? Who wouldn't want to interact with her? Just look at her little sword.
At least you can see her blade. I wonder how many diseases she carries.
I often wonder that about you. The combat is incredibly simple, thanks to there not being a massive variety in the enemies, and them not having many attack patterns. Some enemies attack normally, some will shoot at you, and some will expand and explode. There is a couple of boss encounters too, but I won't ruin them here. Luckily, Quill can fight back using a sword, and can also dodge out of the way just before an enemy strikes. Both actions are very responsive. Sometimes red walls appear and you must fight off waves of enemies. To help Quill with the overwhelming numbers, you can grab an enemy and control them yourself. Controlling enemies also comes into play with many of the puzzles, where you must guide them to a pressure plate or command one to shoot a switch. It can feel a bit odd at first, having to control both Quill and an enemy at the same time, but it doesn't take too long to get the hang of it. If Quill loses a lot of life, a throbbing heart is heard, and her backpack turns red. To heal her, you must grab her. This makes the bond between you and her even bigger, as you actually have to physically touch her and raise her from the ground. If she does die, a page flap from a book is heard. It's a great little detail, which only further gives the impression that you are experiencing something from a fairy tale book. The game's collectibles come in the form of scrolls. These can be quite hard to spot, considering they don't have a glow around them, like other game collectibles do. Finding these really do demand a deep inspection of the environment, especially as some are hidden behind the environment itself. The game is meant to be played whilst in a seated position, but every so often, you will need to lean forward to interact with something, and it also helps you to find the previously mentioned collectibles. If Quill goes behind the environment, you can still see her, so there is never any fear of losing track of her.
At least you wouldn't come down with a sudden sickness. If you did come in contact with her, it would be your own fault.
I'm starting to get the feeling that you're speaking from a previous experience.
Well, I don't know what gives you that impression.
The attention to detail really is amazing in this game. Every new location you enter is handcrafted. Every single piece of vegetation has been placed manually, instead of using a random generator, and it really does make each area so much more scenic. It really does look beautiful, especially when sunlight is seen through an opening. The atmosphere is simply incredible. Quill's animations are superb throughout, especially when she clambers up the environment, thanks to her having more than one ledge animation. She is incredibly tiny when compared with her surroundings. You really do get a good sense of just how small she is thanks to the size of the grass and some of the everyday objects that we are used to seeing. But you also get a great sense of how big you are in the world too, thanks to the location's backgrounds. Seeing a massive castle off in the distance, or looking at the top of the trees towering above you, really does scale you down too.
Your size doesn't matter when it comes to disease. It hits us all equally.
So, you was young when you got bit then?
Oh please, I grew up in only the finest of homes. Vermin were absolutely not welcome in my household.
Quite a bit of the story is told through voiceovers as you flick through pages of a book. Turning each page feels great as the paper does have a physics engine attached. Nearly every page has some sort of effect or animation on. It really does feel like you're reading a book from a Harry Potter movie. The sound is also incredible and also helps with the scale of the world. The quiet tapper of Quill's feet as she runs along the ground really is perfect.
Well, I must admit, she doesn't sound too threatening.
The Twilight Garden is a small expansion that was added to MOS recently. To get to the Twilight Garden, you must enter through portals that appear in 3 different locations during the main game. They're not too hard to spot, but if you are unfortunate and do miss one, you can always get a rough idea of where it is thanks to the chapter select screen. In the garden, you will be helping a toad. You do this by solving numerous puzzles found inside 3 portals. New puzzle elements are introduced here, such as invisible platforms that only become viewable when Quill is close by, and a new sword can now be powered up by your touch, which allows Quill to shoot things from far away. The new gameplay elements are a great addition to the game, and fit into the main game very nicely. The scenery does just as good a job as the main game too. Leaves fall, and platforms sway from the weight of Quill as she jumps onto them. There's something quite mystical about this new area, and it is pleasing for the eyes. I do think people who appreciate art in video games will get the most out of this title, as it is very short and will likely take around 3.5 hours to beat, and it doesn't have too much replayability. Action fans will find the combat quite simple, so the enemies could really have benefited from having more attack patterns, to keep the more lengthy fights more engaging. It's not too bad though, when the bomb type enemy is introduced, as it makes manoeuvring around each battle a little bit more tricky. Overall, MOS is a beautiful adventure. The puzzles and combat are quite simple, but it does ensure that the game moves along at a decent pace. This really is a fairy tale that puzzle platformer fans should go on. The game shines with high quality throughout the journey, and I'm sure that Quill will win the heart of many, even the uptight Mr Oculus.
Well, there is something quite appealing with how Lucy wears a little backpack.
Lucy?
Well, fine. I was 6 years old when Lucy found me. It was a dark winter's night, and the colossal rain was making our chandeliers sway.
Oh no. This is a great game. We're not ending on one of your emotional stories.
Emotional? This is a horror story, I tell you. There's nothing funny about a prick.
Mr Oculus!
Twice, I say. It required 2 injections for me to recover from Lucy's anger.
Maybe it's for the best that you do a mime act in our next review.
Mr Oculus.